Hey guys,
Hey Taylor,
How's it
how's it
going?
going?
it's
Good.
going pretty well.
It's
Yeah,
it
it's going
is.
pretty good.
It's cruising along. Um, so this week we were talking about expectations.
It makes me think of that's kind of like a full circle for this as we're nearing the end of the first trimester. That's kind of where we began. But this
Mhm.
is also a time of year that, we're ending the first chunk of time. And often it's a quick reminder of going back and re-examining all those things that we started with, like Zoom expectations and expectations for your kids and for parents and for teachers. So what do you
Mhm.
think, Faith?
I agree. I think this is the perfect point to um, maybe set some time aside in a class, maybe 20, 30 minutes at some point over the next week or two, and just say, hey, we're a third of the way through the year, believe it or not. And, how do you think it's going? Do you remember what our rules are in the classroom? What are some of the Zoom expectations? How do you get work turned in? All those different types of things. And is there any, and maybe ask the students, so what do you want to see moving forward, right? Maybe take a look at maybe some site changes or things that teachers might want to have in the class, and they can introduce it at that time because the students are now ready. And yeah, and just really lay down those expectations for the next trimester.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that's worth talking about is just Zoom. This is perfect. Zoom goes right.
Here we go.
This is exactly what we're talking about. Is that we too, counselors, how things can just kind of take a shift and take a path that you least expected, and it gives us perspective of what teachers, parents, and students have to go through with distance learning. And yet here we are, right? We have a chance to have, lemon juice or lemonade. So I think that really helping kids for this next period of time is to help them be the best versions of themselves,
Yeah.
because we all know about our challenges. And my biggest thing is, we talk about the social emotional needs, and all of those things have to be addressed in order for kids to be the most successful they can in the classroom. And we wonder often is how teachers would know how their students are doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think just talking about expectations, it makes me think about how oftentimes we go into a situation or any type of relationship. And I think if we're looking at, that student teacher, that is a type of relationship, the student teacher relationship, the student parent relationship. And I think a lot of times we go into these with two types of expectations. So sort of like the clear, like overt ones that we talk about, and then sort of the underlying ones that we don't really talk about, or that we don't know are not being met until they're not met. And I think a lot of times expectations are rigid. It's either a yes or a no, either we're doing it or we're not doing it. And I think what we've seen with COVID is expectations have to be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with that, like you expected to be able to have a dog-free meeting. No, like
Didn't
I've
happen.
had a lot, I've had that expectation a lot, and it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I'm really, one of the biggest things I think that families can do is actually communicate. Talk
Yeah,
to your student, your children, and remember that teachers are people also, and they've got a really they're coming from a tricky mindset because they're trying to build a relationship with their students. They're trying to provide all the instructional minutes that they by law have to provide. And then we've got the social emotional needs of what their kids might be experiencing that often they don't have any idea unless parents are finding a way to communicate with the teachers, which I know is a challenge in itself with all the millions of emails that are going back and forth.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say real quick, I think with parents, having a conversation with their kids about, really what their expectations are is really important. And I think talking to them about how they expect to feel with Zoom, I think that's a big one. And a lot of times we don't think about expectations and feelings going together,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they really do. Just like any relationship, you go into it and you expect it to feel, expect it to be good, expect it to feel like this way, and when it doesn't feel that way, then it's kind of like, oh, something's off. And I think if parents and kids could honestly communicate and say, yeah, I expect Zoom to be kind of boring, and I expect it to be, learning, but I also expect to feel like I'm with a class, and I feel like I'm getting to know my teacher, and, just expressing those kind of things is great. And it's a huge connector for parents and for kids.
And for kids, yeah. It was interesting. I was watching a show last night, and they did their whole show on, going into the shutdown last spring and their kids having to go into distance learning. And the dad was like, "Oh, I've got this." And he had the whole schedule set up, and he had the kids doing it, and he thought that they were doing great. And then he got the call from the school that they hadn't been doing not turning in a bit of work. And he thought he had it down.
Yeah.
So he had to sit down and have a conversation with them and say what's going on. And basically their view was, we don't know how long this is going to be going on. We don't understand why this is happening. They had a hard time seeing school as school. And so they had to kind of rethink how they did things. And he was going back and forth between, well, do I just let him slide? Do I really push him? And I know that that's a difficult decision right now. Yep. But having that conversation with your kids, I think, is an important start, because then you can figure out that middle ground.
Yeah.
When I keep going back to helping your student or your child be the best version of themselves, and what is one thing for one student might look completely different for another student. You have to, parents have a really tough job at hand, because they don't want to go to battle with their child, but it's just trying to find some common ground to help them be as successful as possible. If something's not working, try to change it, reframe it, and try to find something else that might work differently.
Mm-hmm. And working with the teacher on that.
Absolutely working with the
teacher. If you find something that works at home, pass that along to the teachers, right? Communicate that with your child's teacher, because I know that teachers are always looking for ways to be able to help each of their students as well, but they're not the experts on their students. The parents are the experts on the students. So it's really helpful to have that communication as well.
Yeah. Well, I love that you talk about parents being the expert, and kids are their best expert at themselves. Sometimes they don't always know how to put it to words, but that's where the adults that they live with kind of come in handy, as they can help them learn how to express it and find the tools to help manage some of those feelings. And that's kind of where we come in handy.
And I think expectations and perspective really go hand in hand. And I think when we're talking about parents being able to communicate with their kids and talk about expectations, it's important to, especially for older kids, to talk with their parents and with their teachers when they can, but talk about looking at this situation from other people's perspectives and how that might change their expectations. Because I think that a lot of teachers are looking at COVID through their teacher lens, and the expectations through a teacher lens are going to be different than the expectations through a student lens. And I think oftentimes that gap in between expectations is what causes a lot of disconnection. And I think if on both ends, or all the ends, parents, kids, teachers, if everyone can start to look at it from other perspectives and realize, like, oh, if I was a teacher, I might expect this, and this, that's why they're doing this. And if you're a teacher, you might say, well, as a student, oh, I understand why, they're not joining all the time, or they're leaving early, or they're doing X, Y, and Z. Or the parents are having, a hard time with it. But I just think that starting that conversation with parents and kids about perspectives and expectations is really important.
Now, if you look at it from the student point of view, why do they like to come to school? I mean, we like to think that every child wants to come to school because they're all revved up to learn, right? Yeah. And certainly that's part of it. But what most students look forward to is being in their community, being with their friends, having that relationship with their teacher, having that familiar routine day after day after day, and being part of something. Mm-hmm. And the academics are part of that, but it's not the focus of why students want to be at school. So we need to recognize that.
Yeah, it's a really tricky song and dance that we're all playing right now. But we're in this together, and it's really about keeping safe and trying to have everyone feel as good as they possibly can. And I think about what the kids do when they come here. It's playing tag, it's building community, it's the connections that they have, not just with their peers, but with teachers and staff members and custodians, and so on and so forth. And getting a break away from everyone that we live with. I mean, we know how challenging it can be being in the same space for hours and hours and hours and day after day after day. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. And I think that teachers are trying to make the connections the best that they can, but they also have that way of thinking of like, I've got to provide this new instruction to help these kids be prepared for their next, grade level, which is going to come. Mm-hmm. So I think I love your idea, Taylor, of putting yourself into someone else's shoes to think from the other perspective. I think that's really so important and hard to do.
It's super hard to do, especially for kids. I mean, I think for kids, I mean, it's hard to even think about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. So to look at something from someone else's perspective is really difficult. And I think that's why they need parents to come alongside and say, yeah, this is what your teacher might be thinking. This is what your teacher might be doing. And with some kids, we've talked about like what an average day of a teacher looks like. What do they do in the morning? They get up, have coffee, I ask them, I'm like, do you think that the teachers start their day by thinking how I'm going to make Johnny really angry? No, most teachers don't do that. And I think
they get up, they brush their teeth, they have their breakfast, have their cup of coffee, they read the newspaper or whatever, they get on their tablets.
Yeah. And I think
have a whole life before school.
Yeah.
All of that is followed from the previous night of staying up, getting all their instruction, all their lesson plans done ahead of time. So, and then again, I think that there's so much to think about with what kids are going through and what mindset that they're coming from. And every house looks so different. All the background sound might sound differently, from barking dogs to other siblings in the house or a parent that might be working or maybe at daycare. So, thinking about what the kids might be going through before they've even turned on that computer.
Yeah, there you go. We have to be in their shoes as well, right?
Yep.
What state are they in when they come into the classroom every morning?
I go back to saying we don't know what we don't know, which goes back to, in order to meet the expectations, we have to talk about how we're feeling to even get there.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
maybe having that check-in in the morning, just 10, 15 minutes before you buckle down to work might be worth doing. Mm-hmm. So, because usually teachers are able to watch as the kids come in off the playground and come in through the door and how they sit at their seat or are unable to sit down, that kind of a thing. And they can read the room then. But I think it has to be a much more deliberate process in a Zoom setting.
Yeah. And I think it's probably important to talk a little bit about just making sure that we are setting appropriate expectations, because if you set expectations too low, then people aren't challenged. They get bored. They start doing other things. They start going on video games, if you're a kid, or, they start doing all sorts of other stuff. But if you set expectations too high, oftentimes people shoot for it and then give up. And then on either end of those, spectrums, if it's too low or it's too high, the result is that person not feeling good about themselves. And especially right now, expectations need to be comfortably challenging. I don't even know if that's like a good phrase, but that's kind of what I think. Like, they need to be challenging enough to where it's something for us to work towards, but they need to be realistic enough to say, hey, stuff is tough right now, and I need to achieve this and feel good about myself, but it needs to be somewhat of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I just think that, I go back to like every child gets exactly what they need, and that need could look totally different. I know teachers have to provide instruction. They have to provide an education. And kids being able to access that is what I think some of the challenges can be, because if their social emotional needs are not being addressed and they're, things are going sideways for them, it's hard for them to feel that, oh my gosh, learning this information is really that important to them. And that's just where they might be coming from.
Mm-hmm. And that's usually where we can come in and help with those things, because we can talk it over with the student and say, so what's going on, and give them a place to come and be able to unload some of that so that they can go back to the classroom and be able to re-engage, and just give them that space to be able to calm themselves down or whatever it is they need so they can get back in there and get back to their academics. So yeah, I agree with you though, Taylor, those expectations, it's hard finding that sweet spot in the middle, but it's worth working towards.
Yeah. And I think, I was just thinking back to when I was a kid, and I didn't know a lot of the expectations. And oftentimes I didn't know an expectation until I got in trouble for not meeting it. Mm-hmm. And that just sucks. That just sucks as a kid to not be, to get in trouble for something that you weren't even really aware of, and I think it does. I think stuff like that does happen now, especially with distance learning. But I also think that there are times where kids do know the expectation and go around it.
That's kind of their job. That's kind of,
Yeah, totally.
How kids learn how to be strong is through challenges, that's how they learn resiliency. But it's kind of their job to kind of push the buttons sometimes and to kind of push out of those boundaries. It's also a great opportunity to revisit. We get comfortable with things. We get really comfortable with how we're doing Zoom. We get comfortable with how we're, again, this is all relatively new for all of us. So just revisiting some of those expectations and talking about it and sharing, it's going to help to build the relationships at home and also within their class community. So
basically that conversation should come both between the parent, the student, and the teacher and the student.
Yep.
And the student, back to both of them. The student needs to be heard as well, not just told.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What does the student expect from school?
Yeah, it needs to be a conversation, not a
lecture.
Yeah.
Or
there's a time and a place for lectures, but expectations is probably not.
Well, a student was talking to me a day about the other day about how they were feeling, and they talked about their emotions as rain. So they noticed that there was sunshiny, then it started to sprinkle, then they noticed that they started to rain, and then the problem was they didn't tell anyone until it became a big storm. So we're trying to catch these kids at the sprinkle stage. Yeah. And if you get to a steady rain, how do we go back to sprinkle to get back to the sunshiny rainbow? Trying to catch them before the storm can be where the juice is, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that could be part of the discussion when you're talking about expectations, mm-hmm. because you have to acknowledge that expectations are challenges. They can be difficult, especially as you're learning them and you're getting into a routine with them. So what happens if you feel challenged and you get reminded that, this is the expectation? How can you handle that for yourself? Can you take a breath? Can you take a break? Can you go get a glass of water? Maybe set up some things ahead of time so the student has in their head, this is a hard time, but this is what I can do to help myself.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I talked to one student about it, like you're baking cookies, and you've got, your expectation is, I expect these cookies to be awesome right out of the oven, and so you've got all the ingredients and you know how much time they're supposed to spend in there, but if you don't spend all of the time in the oven, it comes out not baked. Or if you leave out some of the ingredients, it might come out looking the same but not tasting great. And so you have to have the combination of doing all the things and all the ingredients and being in the oven for the right amount of time.
Mm-hmm. And if you eat it too soon, you're going to burn your mouth.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've all done that.
Yeah, and if you're in there for too long, you're cooked, just like most Zoom meetings.
You're overcooked, yes.
Yeah.
I want to share, I hope it's okay. I did a circle today, and we were actually talking about, wrapping up the end of the trimester, and I found a really great quote that I read to them, and I'm wondering if you guys are okay with me reading it.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
Okay. A shout out to everyone who's trying right now, trying to do the right thing, trying to stay open, trying to keep going, trying to hold on, trying to let go, trying to find their flow, trying to stay afloat, trying to meet each new day. Hang on. Trying to find their balance, trying to love themselves, trying new things in new ways. I see you. I'm there too. We're in this together.
Oh, I like that.
Great.
That pretty much summarizes it.
Yeah,
I just thought it was so perfect.
We're all trying.
For what
totally.
we're all trying, and we see each person. We see ourselves, but we got to start within ourselves too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Krista.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I mean, like most times, if any of the parents have questions or comments, I know they can email any of us and let us know if there's any topics they want us to cover. Absolutely, send us an email.
Should we remember some of our email addresses again?
Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Krista. So mine is kboyd, B-O-Y-D, at rvusd.org.
And I'm Leith. So mine would be L. Ulrich, ULRICH, at rvusd.org.
I'm THOCKETT at rvusd.org.
All right. Have
All
a
right.
great day.
It's
Have a
good to
great
see you
day.
guys. Bye.
Bye.